Welcome back to the Slow Flowers podcast with Deborah Prinzing. I have a very special guest today, and I'm so delighted to welcome Mary Jo Hoffman to the Slow Flowers podcast. Hi, Mary Jo.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we have mutual love of nature, and your way of capturing your world is just unparalleled. And I want to talk to you about your book called Still, the Art of Noticing. It's been out for a few months. I think it came out May 1st, but I think coming into the holidays, this is a wonderful project for me to highlight and let our listeners and followers know about a really great gift for oneself or a person you love. So, of course, the timing with the holidays, I want to make sure that everyone knows that they can find the link to order Still in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com. This book is it's epic. It's just, first of all, did you ever think you'd produce a book more than 300 pages long? It's massive.
No, I never thought I'd produce a book. I mean, the whole thing is just so crazy to me. I mean, just crazy. The whole process, the publisher and working with the everything. And then once the book went to press, the reception has been, I mean, none of this was ever in my world of possibilities.
Mm. Well, I love it. We can still be surprised by things. I'll just give a little synopsis and then ask you to elaborate, as this is from your publisher. Every day for over a decade, Mary Jo Hoffman has made a photograph of found nature. No subject is too small or too ordinary. For Mary Jo, a former aeronautical engineer, this daily ritual cracked open profound revelations about the connectedness of all things, the importance of place and her own life. This book shares a selection of the breathtaking photographs from Mary Jo's enormous archive, accompanied by perceptive, deeply felt, and oftentimes humorous essays, illuminating the insights gained through this daily creative practice. There are a lot of people trying to do daily creative practices, and it is not easy. But to do over 4,000 days, Mary Jo, what a body of work.
Yeah, it's it was 12 and a half years, and honestly, for the folks that are listening, I would still absolutely be doing it. There's been a break in the chain because I had a house fire in October, and so. But I fully intend to get back to it, and it will just simply have been a break in the chain. But but there's a little bit of it looks like madness, right, to do a daily practice for 4,460 days.
Well, the essays are so beautiful because you kind of lead us through just how this experience manifested itself from a simple idea. You called it a gentle discipline, pulling my focus away from the fragments of early 21st century life, from the concrete world of our immediate surroundings to environments that I observed and participated in. You live in Minnesota.
Correct.
Would you describe where you were when you started the book? Kind of semi-suburban, or
Yep. It's very suburban. It's a second-tier suburb, except that we do have 3 acres on wooded acres of land on a lake. So, very much in and around nature. But it is still an ordinary second-tier suburb of the Twin Cities, yeah.
You don't need a lot. I mean, I suppose you really just need a square 12 inches. I mean, this is to find something that captures your eye as a photographer and that you want to document. Yeah,
it's so astute that you could say that because, and it's really astute because I've literally thought about doing a square meter for a
Really?
year. Yes, I really have. I thought, because at some point in this project, well, let's catch up the listeners about So I'll do a quick summary. It was, back in 2012. I started January 1st, 2012.
Yeah, I love it.
And back in 2011, I found this online community and of creatives, and everybody was being supportive. And I thought, oh gosh, I want a seat at that table. They're having fun, sharing, making making art and sharing it. And so I thought, well, what can I do? And I had a 2-year-old dog that needed a daily walk, and I lived in this wooded environment, and I had 2 kids, and we were a hiking family, and I had beach rocks on the windowsills like everybody, and jars of, sea glass, and I thought, well, I'll combine this love of nature and being outside and the daily walk with the dog with my photography practice. I was a pretty good amateur photographer, so I thought I would, I decided my one-a-day project would be to pick up something in my natural environment every day and photograph it and share it. And it just came out of me. I don't know why. I was an aerospace engineer for 20 years before I was a stay-at-home mom and then artist. And it just came out of this very stylized. I photographed on a white background, and the images were very graphic and spare and minimal, and it was a very specific style. It was kind of thing that after even months, people recognized it as my style. And so anyways, the project got a lot of attention and got a lot of press. And so at the end of the year, it was meant to be a 1-year project. At the end of the year, there was going to be so much press the next year about the project that I didn't quit. But then what happened is, I'm glad I didn't, because I fell so hard for this daily practice that turned into, quite frankly, I call it a playfulness practice, but it, essentially a mindfulness practice, right? For a few minutes every day, I had to be entirely present. I had to be in the now, right? To find my subject. And then I took it home, and then at some point in the afternoon, I photographed it, and then I got to be in that sort of creative play world, right? Where you can sometimes get into flow. And so, between the two, the being the mindful in the morning to find my subject, and then being, playful and creative in the afternoon to photograph it, those two things were such beautiful ways of being that it was, it's honestly, it was no different than like a yoga practice or a running practice. It was a creative practice that was just made me feel so good that I just didn't want to quit. And so I did it for 12 and a half years.
Right. It was sort of how you moved through life, and then it basically became your life. And
it became it became my lifestyle. Right. Absolutely. It's really, it sounds crazy to, 4,460 days without missing a day. But if you're a runner or whatever, that's not, people do that, a piano player or,
You're making it sound joyful. We both are acquainted with Lorene Edwards Faulkner, who has her process of seeing color in the garden. And one of the things she always nudges me about is it's possible to do the same thing every day for years because we all brush our teeth. And I'm like,
exactly.
Well, that's pretty unfancy, but I love it.
Yeah. And for sure, honestly, for sure, there were days when I didn't, I was busy, especially as I got weirdly, it was easier when I was younger and the kids were younger. As I got older, I had to start taking care of my mom and things like that. So it got a little harder. So there were for sure days when it just wasn't fitting in and I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. And, none of us at this age wants to not brush our teeth anymore. I remember when you did when you were a kid. Anyways, but I learned that those days were sometimes often some of the most creative, and I was more dedicated to not breaking the chain. That, like the satisfaction was in having this 4,000 link chain that I didn't want to break, and so you just do it, like not unlike brushing your teeth. But most days it was joyful, but not every day. Some days you're just literally phoning it in. Yeah,
it's just a grind. But sometimes, like I think you mentioned that sometimes were the best lessons that you took from those maybe on the face of it unexciting subjects or whatever.
Absolutely. I teach workshops and I talk about that. There's a whole bunch of reasons why those days when you're dashing it off, the sun, I shoot with natural light. So the sun is setting and you just, you haven't, whatever, you're in a hurry. But that, there's reasons why those often are some of your best work. That deadline is overriding the inner critic. You know what I mean? There's reasons, and sure enough, sometimes those ones where you're just dashing it off, and they end up being really, really interesting photos because and that's the power of dailiness. It's like it's every day, like it's just one day. It takes all the pressure off, right?
Yes.
It's just one day. I'm going to take these dead daddy long legs off the deck and I'm going to put them on white paper and I'm going to photograph them. And then it turns out to be a really interesting photo, And so,
what was the very first item you photographed? Do you remember?
I do. So I started this daily photo project, 1-a-day photo of found nature on January 1st in Minnesota.
Right.
I'm a Minnesota native. I know better than to start a nature anything in the middle of winter. You know what I mean?
There's no daisies blooming.
Nothing but bare branches, nothing in 2 feet of snow. So my first photo was the sawtooth aspen leaves that had been so they're brown and overwintered, and they hadn't turned into full skeleton leaves yet, but they were damaged by the weather. And so they just had damage in a beautiful pattern. So it was a collection of those. I still like the photo.
Well, yeah. And it's interesting how you talked about the fact that your style, your aesthetic of photography is sort of found nature in a minimalist style, but that it became instantly your signature look. And I don't think you probably didn't start out that way. You just photographed in a way that made you, I don't know, feel happy or satisfied with the look. I mean,
it's very interesting because over the 12 years of the project, the project was so profound. I mean, it gave back so much. And the irony is I started the project to get better at visual composition. I thought, well, I'll do this found nature. I'll make collections of things, and compose them every day, and it will make me better at the art of composition. And the irony is 12 and a half years later, I got significantly better at photography and Photoshop. I became really, truly quite a knowledgeable naturalist, right? And really deep personal knowledge of my bioregion. And I feel like compositionally, I'm exactly where I was when I started. So the irony is I started to but the truth is the style came out of me. It just came out of me. I'm an engineer by training. I worked in research for 20 years. If you look at the book, look at my work, it's very gridded and geometric and patterned, and the negative space is often very intentional. You know what I mean? You can see the engineer in there, and that just came out of me.
Right. Well, that makes me want to a sentence or two that I jotted down when I was reading Still. I have a notebook full of all these juicy phrases. But your husband, Steve Hoffman, wrote the foreword, and he said, "There will always be some engineering more or less evident behind what Mary Jo crafts of her materials and what she crafts of herself. And what engineers do is build things." So it's that you would talk about composition, but in your mind, it felt like you were building an image. I'm wondering if that's
and building an image and building a body of work. I mean, and then ultimately, really, truly building a lifestyle, right?
You don't do, in the floral industry, there's a lot of people doing these quote unquote flat lays, these sort of
Mm-hmm.
cut the stems off the flowers and have the heads down and make a little pattern or whatever, or do some kind of, horizontal orientation. But you are not exclusively doing that. You've got depth and dimension and shadow, and I'm so curious how you actually pull that off, because some of these subjects have an angle to them.
Yep, absolutely. I like that you noticed that. This is really, you've got some very astute questions and noticing. I shot with, again, this my signature style, right? And it just came out of me. It wasn't, premeditated or considered.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, I just crafted photos I liked of the things I found. And the things I picked up because they caught my attention for some reason, right? Often it's color, but often it was structure, their structure, their shape, or their texture. And so I'd bring them home to photograph, and really the photographing, one of my rules was natural light. And that's why you see the depth in the photos. And that was purely a decision that I just don't like equipment. So I didn't want to fuss with equipment. I didn't want to have a lighting and artificial lighting. And so I just did it. I will have again a kitchen that had skylights. And so I tried having studios over the years and just kept coming back to my kitchen floor, and where it had the best natural light. And I just played with the subjects until I saw, the color in the composition I like. And so this was often softly lit. It was, and my style is softly lit. So, it's softly lit, usually from the side. And, and so I wanted that depth. So I often wanted a very soft shadow.
Yeah.
It's just my personal style. Sometimes, like if in editorial magazines now, the sort of like flash photography look was trending for a while with harsh shadows. Yeah. I mean, somebody could have started a project with that kind of look. I just picked softly side lit image. And for me, again, the scientist coming out, I was just trying to show the subject as accurately as I saw it. Yeah. It was truly that simple, because I was picking up these subjects because they were, I found them absolutely beautiful. You know what I mean? Right. And so then I came home and it's literally like a little kid going, Mom, look what I found.
Right. I can see you. I can picture you like on your stomach with the camera just to get that deep shadow on the muscle shells. Or you're not just being over. The orientation changed because you took a 360-degree approach to these subjects and found the right angle. Depending on what it was. I love that.
Yeah, and that was the play. That was the play part of it. I called it, and a lot of times, I called it MacGyvering. I had to, and I loved it. Again, the engineer me, but I had to find a way to hold up or elevate or dangle the subject so that it looked as natural as I saw it out in the out in nature. And the reason I carried things home to photograph is. Because if you look at my book, if you look at the photos, they're very detailed, right? And if you go out in nature, the slightest bit of wind, I couldn't have done that, So the wind, it wasn't the light outside. The light would have been, maybe I would have had to use a diffuser because it would have been so bright. But it was really the wind that kept me from creating the kinds of photos I wanted to make outside. So I did carry everything into my kitchen floor.
Except for the time that you took your whiteboard to photograph the coyote on the edge of the highway with your husband's help. Like, that blew my mind. Like, that's devotion, Mary Jo. But even still, you were consistent in your backdrop. You were consistent in using natural light. You just had to go to that particular subject because it was an animal that had been hit by the side of the road, right? Yeah.
And there's probably maybe 10% of the photos where I had to go outside. If you look at all those winter photos, I can't bring those inside. They would immediately melt, all the frost, all the frozen all the frozen cranberries, the ice-covered branches. I had to be outside to do those. They immediately melted if I tried to bring them inside. So, so I did go outside, but I had to wait for windless days to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a photo that is in the maybe one that you sent me that is in a field of flowers. I can't remember what kind of flowers there are, but thistles, yes, and you had like a stand with a whiteboard, and it was elevated, and you were kind of just framing a section of a field. Yeah.
Those are just roadside. They're called nodding thistles or musk thistles, and they that was literally on a freeway on ramp. The little little triangle that gets created, there by the on ramp. So yes, I'd gone out and with my husband, and it was one of those years where whatever, the rain was just right, and the thistles that are usually thigh high were chest high, and it just was beautiful. They were absolutely beautiful. So I talked to my husband, and it was right beside my son's soccer pickup. And so I talked him into coming with me for pickup, parent pickup at soccer, and I said, I'm gonna, I want to try capturing these outside. And the irony is, I use that photo because I like the photo of my husband was taking photos on his phone of me, out in the field. But the irony is those photos that I took while I was out there in the field, with my hazard lights on the freeway on-ramp, those were all over, too bright actually. So I wasn't able to, they didn't like make the book, if you will, I published them that day as my daily photo for that still day, but that, it was a full sun day, a sunny summer day, and those, parts of the images get overexposed and whatever, so, anyway, it's a fun photo, and it is symbolic of how I do my foraging. I do a lot of pulling over with the hazard lights on and jumping out of the car to grab something. But yes.
Yeah. I think a few florists who are into foraging, quote unquote, foraging responsibly can relate to that.
Yeah.
I want to change the subject a little bit and just move on to what was such an amazing surprise to me as I read through still in the second half of the book, where you talk about this shift in how you understood seasons and these influences from different cultures about what is a season, and we don't just have 4 seasons. It blew my mind how it kind of radically reordered your relationship with nature as you understood that, and maybe explored it for your own environment in your own world. Can you talk a little bit about where that all came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the project was so profound over the years, just kept revealing more and more like my publisher said, about life, but about me and about living. And the first lesson I learned was the power of these daily practices, just how powerful they are. I call it radical incrementalism, and how quickly you can build up an impressive body of work by just doing a little bit every day. But then the second one was this idea of what I call placefulness. And I'll tell you, and out of that, it was this idea of 72 microseasons. And this is where, I mentioned earlier, I really did become a naturalist, or an informed citizen scientist of my bioregion, and that was not one of my goals when I set out, but it became, my goal was creative. I wanted to do, work on the art of composition and make photographs, but what happened is, after the first couple of years of photographing the obvious things in your, think of the obvious things in your bio. Where are you, and where am I talking to you, Deborah? Where are you located?
I'm in Seattle. So
okay,
there's a definite regularity of what I see.
Yeah.
in my environment. Right.
Right. So I'm in Minnesota, the upper Midwest, and northern Midwest, and it's the oak trees and the pine trees and cattails, lots of cattails, and there's milkweed, and so there's the thistles I was talking about, and you do those for the first year, and then maybe the next year you do, like, instead of the oak leaves, you're doing the maple leaves or the birch trees,
Right.
But then after, I did this for 12 and a half years, after a while you want, just for my own fun, my own interest, I wanted to keep, I didn't want to keep doing oak leaves, you know what I mean? And so, or acorns or whatever, or birch bark, I wanted to get more deeper and deeper and deeper. And so anyway, what happened is I didn't work, so nobody believes that I never worked ahead. And I did actually make a photo every day, and what I did try to work ahead like that first year, and what I realized is it was harder to stop and start. Sure. Like if I were to make 3 images one day and then not make 2 images for the next day, then it was like starting afresh.
You're talking about being in the flow. I would imagine that.
Right.
Been.
I mean, imagine literally, it's no different than being a runner. You don't run all your miles on Monday and then you're done for the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't. So, it's the same thing. It was easier to just do it every day and just be in the flow and the habit and the ritual and the rhythm of doing it every day than to stop and start. So anyway, but I didn't work ahead, but I did always carry 2 or 3 ideas in my head. Like, okay, I just saw, let's take, March is a really hard month in Minnesota. And, at some point in late March, the pussy willow will burst. And it will be the very first, there'll be signs of spring prior to that, but they just aren't things I can photograph. Like the sound of snow melting, that tinkling of melting snow, or the birds, the geese arriving, the Canada geese arriving. So, there's these signs, but the first sign that I can photograph generally is the pussy willow, or when the pussy willow bursts. But then, so I would see the pussy willow burst, and then soon after that, there's a whole cascade of events that happens. The maple blossoms burst, the willow catkins, appear. The color of the stems of the dogwood change, and the color of the stems of the willow change. And, so there's this whole cascading event of things that happen as soon as the pussy willow bursts. And I was starting to put this mental map together in my head because I knew, okay, I'm going to do pussy willow today, maybe again tomorrow, photograph it differently. But then after that, I'm going to start looking for willow and maple. You know what I mean? Like I started putting this mental map together of what I could photograph. And what I was realizing is to myself was, the pussy willow was going to be around for about 5 days. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if we had a lot of wind and rain, it would only be around for 3 days. And if there wasn't a lot of wind, it would be around for maybe 7-10 days. You know what I mean? It really depended. So one day I'm reading this design book, and completely unrelated. This is about, product design and graphic design. And the writer, Kenya Hara, refers to this Japanese tradition of 72 microseasons that he said during the Heian period in Japan, which is sort of like the Italian Renaissance, the high culture period, that well-educated peoples lived by this 72 microseasonal calendar, which were increments of 5 days. And wow. I just when I read it, it was a throwaway comment in an otherwise, a book about something completely different. And I just went, oh my God. So, went online, started Googling 72 microseasons. And sure enough, it's this beautiful traditional calendar in Japan. It's about 1,200 years old. And they lived by it for about 500 years. And because they lived by it for 500 years, it's, the seasons and the seasonal names it's like reading haiku. So 72 microseasons are 5-day increments seasonal, 5 times 7 is 72
Yeah.
a year.
And then you come up with your own little haiku-like phrases for them.
Yeah.
So
what I did, so what I eventually did for the book, matter of fact, it was the concept. I had been approached by an agent to do a book a couple years earlier, and I kept saying, I have this huge body of work. It makes sense. I do want to do a book, but I don't have an idea for a book. And I don't want to just do, I don't want to do something simplistic, And so anyways, when I found the 72 microseasons, and then I thought, well, I've been doing nothing but close observation of my environment for 12 years. Like, I think I can do this for my environment. I think I can map the whole year in 5-day increments,
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I did it. It was actually over COVID. It was one of those great things that came out of COVID where I had the time finally to sit and do it. And I just mapped my bioregion, which is the Great Lakes North, I call it, into what happens in 5-day increments throughout the year. And it turned out to be beautiful, and I liked it. And so I said to my agent, I have a book idea. Let's do it. And that was the start of the book, actually.
Well, I just turned to page 194 of Still, which is December 2nd through December 6th. So we're talking on December 5th. It's time of snow, and your little phrase to describe that 5-day period is, which you're currently in, black branches against white skies. And it just takes my breath away to think about how you're giving a language to what you've already experienced and seen for, a decade. And it's a wonderful way to look at the year.
Yeah. It really
is amazing.
Yeah. And then, of course, I went into, I got fascinated by calendars and then realized, the Native Americans, so our calendar is an astronomical calendar. It's the sun's, our revolution around the sun, and then the moon, the phase,
okay.
So a month is a lunar cycle, and a year is, a solar cycle. And so our current calendar that we use is astronomical calendar. So this is a seasonal calendar is a little different. It's more like looking down at the soil instead of up at the heavens, right? What's blooming, what's happening. I mean, of course, it's all driven by the sun and light, the daylight and the intensity of the sun. But anyways, it is a different way of going through the year. And it's and a lot of the indigenous cultures did it. They had the strawberry moon and the harvest moon, and anyway, I'm finding it a beautiful, and it's just to live in a place. And I do think you could do this. It took me 12 years to gain this knowledge about my place, but right. I think if you were being attentive, you could get that kind of knowledge about your place in like maybe 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like if you were really paying it, like what's happening right now, and then you'd want like the second and third year just to verify
I think I think that's what farmers do. Farmers are
right.
Kind of in tune with the whatever the parcel of land is that they're tending to, and I just think some of these are not unspoken. They're like in your gut or in your whatever between your ears, but you don't necessarily articulate them. And so
right. And gardeners have that knowledge too. They really
do. Absolutely. You're giving people a way to put a language to it.
Yeah.
You called it visual fingerprint in a way, that what you're doing in terms of marking those days through this astronomical calendar, which is just one way of living in a year. A year is sort of abstract in that regard.
It's absolutely, I mean, a day, the sun rises and sets, so a day isn't quite abstract. But, what we call an hour is purely man-made. It's purely artificial, But anyway, the thing that is interesting, like I'm saying, you could probably do this, Deborah, in Seattle, but one of the things you do have to do is kind of look past all the non-native stuff, because that's gonna be that's going to confuse you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to confuse
Mm-hmm.
the seasons. And
Yeah.
so if you want to really get in touch with what's happening seasonally in my bioregion, and it will be very consistent, and it will be, one thing unfolds. Like, for example, like I know that here in Minnesota, we're famous for mosquitoes. When I see the first mosquito hatch in June, that within a day or two, I will see all of the fly-catching birds. So
yes,
they won't arrive.
Amazing.
And I do think they must just come up the Mississippi Flyway, literally following one bug hatch after another. But the birds won't arrive until the bugs hatch. But as soon as the bugs hatch, the birds will arrive. And so it's just having that kind of knowledge is fun. Like,
Beautiful.
Yeah. But
it goes back to your phrase about, is it place? What did you call it?
Playfulness. Yeah.
Playfulness. Yes. Yeah. And you wrote, I just jotted this down. Just right after I read about the 72 micro seasons. You wrote, living in a creative state for as much of life as possible. The art and the life could not be separated in any way that I could get excited about. Like, all of a sudden, you've redefined what is a life of a creative individual in your world.
Yes.
I hope we can all take inspiration from that.
Yes, I hope so. And I actually, that idea of living as a total work of art, I when the book came out, I was asked to do a 3-part lecture series for the 92nd Street Y.
Oh, yeah.
And the first part was on the power of dailiness. And the second part was on this idea of 72 microseasons and playfulness. But the third lecture was on this idea of living as a total work of art, where the art informs the living and the living informs the art, right? And and there's like some examples where, like Georgia O'Keeffe at her ranch in Abiquiu, it's hard to separate the art from the person, right? And so when you see it, you recognize it, like Monet at Giverny with his water lilies,
Yes, you gave some really great examples from around the world, but not a lot. I mean, it's unique that someone has that kind of integrated practice and life, right?
But I'm fascinated by it, and so if I do a second book here, we'll see. I would like to take that idea farther. Yeah. Where the life and the art and the life they feed on each other, and it all becomes one. And I did get to live in that state for 12 and a half years. I mean, honestly, it seems so weird right now to be sitting here I got kicked out of it with a house fire, honestly, and I'm spending my days doing, negotiating with insurance. It's the craziest thing.
I mean, how profoundly ironic that you have this beautiful book come out in May, and then months later, on October 4th, you and Steve experienced this extensive house fire that destroyed the home in which you made all this art. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, it is. From what a year, right? From one of your highest highs to one of your lowest lows. Yeah. The exciting thing is that I feel like, okay, what I wrote about in that book, in that last essay about it was my early thoughts about this idea of a totally integrated artistic life. And I know I'm not in that space today as we talk, but I know I can get back there, and I know how to get back there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I am temporarily pulled out of it with the reality of this fire, but it will only take a couple more months for me to, settle up with insurance and get the house rebuild process starting. And then I can get back in there, and I know I can, and I know how delicious it is to live in that state. You know what I mean? So that's beautiful. Kind of exciting. Yeah.
Well, you end the book, well, first of all, if for anyone who's really interested, in the very back of the book, you have an excellent kind of section on how the practice and how you how you actually collected your images and produced your images, which I would encourage anyone to look at because it's so applicable to other artful projects. But the last essay ends with you and Steve kind of asking yourself about this dream of, living this life as a work of art, and you say, what would it take? And so it sounds like you figured out where you need to be. You just have to move through this, like, unfortunately bad chapter of recovering from the fire to get to the other side.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes, I think I feel like we did, like, because I stuck with that project so long and it just kept revealing it just kept revealing, I don't know, insights to me, like I said, dailiness, the power of doing a little something every day, and then playfulness, the beauty of living so connected to your place, wherever that is. And just the connection and the relationship with place and how fulfilling that is. And then the third one was this idea of this integrated creative life and what it takes to be in that state, and how thrilling, honestly, it is to be in that creative state for most of the day or a better part of a day, and how to do that without being an art monster, without having to, like, ignore your friends and family to be in your studio. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Was, we weren't doing that. We were just living quite ordinary suburban lives, but still being able to stay for the better part of each day in this sort of connected, creative mindset. And so,
right.
yeah, I'm excited. Matter of fact, if I do write more on this idea, this interruption, this real life interruption, will be good, because it will. I don't think that every trauma or every crisis needs a silver lining, but it will be good
right.
for me. It will be good for me to, like, exercise getting myself back into that creative space.
Right.
To see how repeatable it is. You know what I mean?
You know so much more now than you did back on January 1st of 2012, when you were just like, oh, this is like a whim in a way. And now it's so ever present in your consciousness of how you are.
But, I have no doubt that's what I want to get back to. Like, I did feel like we tapped into something profound, a way of living that was, and again, for me, for you, creative expression, for a lot of, and connection to nature, for all the gardeners and out there, connection to nature and creative expression. That's how I have meaning. For other people, it might be music or athletics. You know what I mean? Like, but the principles still apply. It's just that connection to nature and creative expression are the ones that give me meaning. But I still think the technique applies, even if your meaning making is, something else. You know what I mean?
Yes, right. No, I think that the analogy would be, I guess, where is your church? Your church could be at the ocean, your church could be in the mountain. Everyone has something unique for them. I just think that still is just it's a gift, and I'm so happy that you were willing to share a little bit of the backstory and the process with the Slow Flowers community, because I know it will inspire people who haven't yet discovered you. I'm just delighted that, for some magical reason, your publisher sent me this book when it came out, and I'm not sure how I got on that gift list, but that led to this. So thank you for talking with me. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. I had such my publisher is Fiden, but the publisher was Matt Monicelli, which is an imprint. They're owned by Fiden.
Right.
So I got the best. I got like the Monicelli was like this small art house publishing. I got that small personal touch, with the editor, and then I got the global distribution of Fiden Corporation. It was just like this really, really great experience. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear it. Well, we will follow along. I will share your Still blog link in our show notes for people. It looks like right now people can go back and look at all of the posts. So there's a lot here to digest. And in the future, maybe in the near future, you'll begin posting again.
Yes, I'm taking a hiatus. I just got my new camera yesterday. I waited for Black Friday to buy it.
Love it.
And I will be back. I'm just taking a hiatus while I deal with some details. And then yes. But and again, people, the book has been so well received. It's in its third printing already.
Oh my goodness, Mary Jo, that's great.
Yes, and I encourage people. It's been a very, very popular gift for people to give to either other creatives interested in this idea of dailiness, or to like gardeners or nature lovers. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's in the quiet of winter, especially. It's a beautiful book to just be able to sit with and read over and over again. Your writing is so lovely, and I kind of want more, but then do I want more writing, or do I want more images? Fabulous. Thank you so much, Mary Jo. This has been such a delightful conversation, and you're so generous to share time with us, and we're excited to get this out into the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. I really am thrilled to do this. It was great.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Bye-bye.